Hello everyone, TinaGale back with another My Scrappy Ideas. Today I have another layout that's a starburst pattern, and I've done one of these before and I gave a lot of my tips and hints in that particular video to show you how I did mine, and kind of simple and easy without a lot of making a pattern, cutting it out and doing all that, just multiple steps. I don't do multiple steps if I don't have to. And so this is kind of similar, but just a little bit different, and then I took a few shortcuts. So what I've done is I had all of these scraps left from my kit club, and this was the last layout that I was going to do. And so you'll see some of the scraps off to the left. And I just cut them kind of in triangular shapes. And then what I've done on my layout is I've drawn the line where I want it. I just want it on the top third of my layout. And then I have a point drawn, because one of the tips that I gave you before is if you see starburst and some of them seem better than others, normally it's because they all go to a center point, and sometimes people don't do that. They just put random triangles and they're going all different directions to the center, and it makes the eye really confused because it's just not sure where it's going. So the way this works is I just laid my first piece down, and then I laid my second piece down, and I put a ruler to the edge wherever my paper runs off to that point and drew a line, and that's going to be where I need to cut. That way I can use up all of these scraps. I apologize for my head. It's kind of hard to do this with the camera where it's at. So that way I can use up all of the scraps to the sizes that I have, and I don't have to do any pre-planning or anything like that. I can just use what I have. And so here you'll see that I had kind of laid it out before I turned the camera on, and so some of them I have a few little lines drawn, but this is the for real time, so I had to recheck everything and make sure, because I rearranged some of the papers too, because when I got to the end I had a little bit of a gap, so I needed to adjust which papers I had where. So again, just start with your first piece. Well, let's back up. Cut your shapes into somewhat triangular. This is especially true if you're using scraps like I am, and you'll see that not all of them come to a point. It's just I had it angled, and that was because, like, if you look at the two blue pieces, that was one big piece, and so all I did was cut across the center of it at a diagonal so that I got two triangular pieces to work with. So that's all I was doing in the beginning, and I wished I'd kind of videotaped that, of how I had my or how all of these were one piece of scrap and I just cut across diagonally. But hopefully you can understand, and this will help you if you have some scraps and you want to try this layout, because it really turned out great, at least in my opinion. Okay, so now I'm just checking this last one. When I get these all on here, then I'm just going to flip it over and trim it to fit to my cardstock. And I should say this is for a particular challenge that I am hosting over at My Scraps and More, and also on the new challenge Facebook page for My Scraps and More. And let me look. It's going to be the challenge for June 3rd, so that's when this is going to go up. I'm actually videotaping this early. I have quite a few little layouts that I'm doing and trying to edit and kind of get ahead of the game, because I've gotten behind in my videos and stuff. So I like to have a few more out than what I have been, and since it just seems like I just haven't been able to catch up since vacation. Okay, so the challenge is going to be all about hand stitching, and that's going to be this next little bit. So like I said, I've got them all on there. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to trim them all off, and then I can put any extra adhesive if there's anything that's kind of still up, because I just kind of put the adhesive in the center. That's my other tip. I'm going to be stitching over the edges of each one of these papers, and so I didn't want adhesive along those outside edges, so I just used adhesive right down the center of those papers. So that's another hint. If you want to add stitching, just put your adhesive in the center parts. That way you're not ruining your needle, and or if you're doing it by hand or your sewing machine. Either one, the adhesive can really gum up and it makes it hard. So this is the stitching guide that I like to use. It has several different just straight stitches. There's a wide one, and there's the scalloped, and then there's one that's like a zigzag, and then there's one that's kind of a zigzag with a stitch in between each zigzag, if that makes sense, as well as several shapes and things. So I've featured this ruler several times, but this is my go-to stitching guide. If you have ones like Amy Tan does a lot of stitching guides, we are memory keepers, there's lots out there, and you don't have to have a stitching guide. You can simply just take some kind of piercing tool, and even if you don't have a piercing tool, you can use your needle to poke your holes. So that is the one thing that I would recommend. Go ahead and poke your holes. And so here I've chose a different stitch for kind of each one of these, and I've poked all of my holes. So here's kind of a close-up of what it looks like. And another thing that you can do if you want to do faux stitching is just do your holes like this and not put thread through them, and it still gives a great effect. Okay, so I had just bits and pieces of my leftover papers after I did my starburst, and so I took my Martha Stewart butterfly punch and I just punched as many as I could, and then the rest of that paper was little tiny, and I brushed it off into the trash can, and this collection is gone. There is nothing left. It feels so good. So I'm just putting these in my little tin here, and I'm going to use some for embellishments on this layout, and then I'll have some left for other layouts. Okay, so here's the way my layout is. I pulled out my embroidery floss, and that's usually what I use, and my needle, and I'm going through trying to decide which ones that I want. Normally I kind of stitch in white or off-white, but I really wanted to keep it this spring, summer, not spring, summer, I'm ready for summer, this summer feel. And so I pulled out some teal aqua colors that were bright, and the green, and I even pulled out that gray that was kind of pretty, but I decided on the green. It looked better over the orange as well as the blue, and I felt like the blue stood out just a little bit too much on top of the orange, because those are complement colors, so they're really going to bounce off of each other. And so the green is closer on the color wheel to the orange and the blue, and so that's how I decided on what color I wanted to do. And so normally when I do stitching, I use a 2-ply thread from embroidery floss. And here you see a close-up of all the different stitching, and there'll be close-up photos at the end too. But like I said, I did each one kind of different, and so it really looks nice. So back to when you do your stitching, I usually do 2-ply. If you're doing simple stitching, like you do a title, then sometimes I will use a 3-ply thread, because then it's just that much bolder and it looks better. So you just kind of have to decide what you're stitching, whether it's going to be something simple, smaller, or like the stitching. When you do the stitching, there's so much more of it that you need less threads to go through. And if you do try to do a 3-ply on a stitching like this, it's liable to just tear your paper. So that's kind of what you want to be looking at. Okay, so then the few little scraps that I did save were just these little strips like this, and I wanted something along the bottom to kind of ground, and so I just took some different widths and different lengths, and I even kind of tore the edge, the end pieces of some, and I'm just going to put across the bottom there, and then I also go and I do a running stitch along the bottom. So that's kind of what I'm showing you right there. And I'm sorry, my layout kind of got pulled down. I think my camera's got moved. Well, I know my camera got moved. I put my extra computer, my other one that I replaced, back onto this desk so that I could use it to watch or listen to YouTube process videos while I film my videos, and just different things like that. So I have it on my desk, and I had to move my stand for my computer over, so it's gotten bumped a little bit. I'm gonna have to work on it. Okay, so I just took one of the branding strips and I used it to go across the bottom, and you notice that I had a hole in that starburst on part of that paper, and I wasn't worried about it because I knew I was going to have this running strip across the bottom. I also knew my photo was going to go right there. So that's the other thing. If you're working with scraps and you're doing this, but you might not have quite enough on some of them, look to see if you're able to use your photos and stuff over the top, and then you can kind of cheat. Nobody will know that that hole is there unless they watch this process video. So, okay, so I just have these two photos, and these are of my children way back almost 20 years ago. If you follow along and you're a subscriber to my YouTube videos, then you know I have been scrapping a lot of these photos that are 20 and 20 plus years old. So it feels good to kind of get some of these memories put down. But most all of the photos that I found are memories that, or photos that just evoke all these kind of memories that I have of my kids when they were smaller. And I want to get them down before I forget them, or, you know, so that they'll have them and they'll remember them in case they don't. Okay, so for the rest of the embellishments, I have that round circle, and that was a sticker that goes with this paper collection. This paper collection, in case I haven't said, is from Close to My Heart, and it's the Blossom paper collection, and they have sticker sheets to match. And so that was one of the stickers that I had left, and I just did a scalloped circle punch of the blue paper to go behind it, and I'm going to pop dot it up between these photos. Then the Goodtimes, that is from the American Crafts Sunkissed phrase stickers. That was in my last purchase from My Scraps and More when I bought all of my summer papers and things. And so that's one of the titles from there. And then all the little word strips that you see in the different colors that match this layout, that is one of the branding strips from the paper from this collection. And it just had all of these words in a row. And so I just trimmed them down to include into part of my journaling and stuff, because my journaling was going to kind of be short, but all of these words really spoke into how I felt about the journaling on these photos and stuff. And so I'm just going to put those down and just stagger them to the bottom. So I'm trying to keep everything, if you kind of look at my layout, you could draw a line across my two photos, and that would be a long line, and then bring it down to a point towards the bottom, and it would be like a triangle, an upside down triangle. And so that's how I'm trying to keep all of my elements of my layout in that design area there, because that journaling is going to go right across the bottom underneath those word strips. And so you'll notice I went ahead and used all of these butterflies, and I just use a small glue dot on the very center of them, and because the glue dots are really, really sticky, they're not going to go anywhere, and I keep the wings flapped up just for some added dimension. So you'll see here I'm sitting here thinking about my journaling, kind of where I wanted it and how much room it was going to take, and so I'm just going to do that, and that's pretty much going to wrap up this layout. And like I said, I will put some still shots in here at the end. If you'd like to play along, hop on over to My Scraps and More, to the forum, or to our new challenge page, and this layout along with all of the challenge instructions will be on there. But it's going to be basically, you're going to do some hand stitching on a layout. This is for the Got Talent, so it's not that you have to be an experienced advanced scrapbooker, but just something to maybe push you out of your comfort zone, maybe just to go a step further on a layout. Something that you wouldn't do. I definitely would not do this much hand stitching on a layout normally, you know, day-to-day layouts. But it's fun and it's nice to do it occasionally. And like I said, this layout just turned out gorgeous, I think. I am really, really happy. I love the stitching. I love all of the embellishments. Everything just went together really, really well. And I'm just so happy to have this memory down and in my album. So be sure to hop on over there and join us. If you're not a subscriber, I'd love to have you click subscribe. If you've watched it and enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you real soon. Bye.